Today, I'm thrilled to welcome composer Jeff Tymoschuk, renowned for his remarkable work in film, television, and video games. Jeff, your compositions have graced diverse genres. Notable contribution, of course, to the James Bond video game franchise, which is the focus of tonight's interview. Jeff, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to me on the
Oh,
Bond
well,
Bulletin.
well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I was an avid player of Nightfire in the early 2000s. It was one of the first games I played, I think, after having
Oh,
Agent
yeah.
Under Fire. But I remember I bought Agent Under Fire and didn't have a console for it. I
Oh,
just thought, there's Bond on it, buy it. And Nightfire came
mhm.
shortly after that, so that got me into Bond gaming. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I want to take you back a little bit to the early 2000s. Nightfire, you did music for. How did you get this gig? Were you actively seeking to be part of a Bond game, or was it just a project among others?
It was it was complete luck, actually. I had started working in film, but when you start working scoring film, you make no money. You're working on friends' movies, and it's not a viable career at first. And I somehow convinced myself that I needed a nice apartment, and so I had a job that was coming, and I signed a lease on this apartment, and then after signing the lease, the job fell through, and then I was scrambling. So I spent a long time desperately looking for work, and because music composition uses a lot of the same tools as sound design, I I ended up going on the EA job boards, Electronic Arts job boards, and it was just out of desperation. It's like, okay, they're hiring sound designers. I guess I could do that. I've got all the tools and the knowledge of the skills. So I applied for that, and it was getting pretty serious financially at that point, and it was really sort of at a desperate stage. And I ended up getting a call to go in for a sound design interview, and I went in, and as just sort of an optimistic measure, took my music reel with me and met with the sound design lead, the audio director, and one of the program guys. And I found out it was for Need for Speed and
Mhm.
for Bond. And I was an enormous Bond fan. I like, as soon as I found that out, I just thought that was the coolest thing ever. And I started like falling all over myself, like, oh, this is amazing. I'd love to work on that. And and then Jen, the audio director, she asked about my music, and I said, well, I do a lot of film scorey, orchestra, and electronic type of stuff. And she's like, really? Because we don't have a composer for Bond yet. And then I was stumbling all over myself, basically. Oh, can I would love to demo for this. I know this music inside out. I'm reading a John Barry biography right now. I've gotten
Mhm.
speeding tickets to this music, which was true. And so I think my enthusiasm uh, paved the way. And so she agreed to let me pitch on it. And so I spent a few days coming up with uh, some demo material, and I submitted it and got the gig. And
Mhm.
then I spent 6 months doing Bond, which was amazing.
Isn't it a little bit intimidating at first?
Oh
Thinking,
yeah,
oh, I can understand the anticipation, the prospect of doing a project like this, but then there must have been a moment where you think, oh, well, it's Bond after all, so better make it worthwhile.
yeah. Well, and because like I held the series and the music from the series in such high regard, I really felt like I had to make it really good. Never mind for the series and for the franchise, but for me, because I wanted to make it as good as I could do. I had the confidence of youth that I could do anything, but it's like, okay, well, now it's real. You kind of have to do this. and so yeah, it was intimidating for sure. But once I started it got to be a lot of fun.
Yeah. And there are actually three people credited for the score of Nightfire: Steve Duckworth, Ed Lima, and yourself. As I understand, there was music for the console version. There was different music for the PC version. How was this work split among you three? And did you work
Well,
together at any point?
not at all. No, I've met Ed a number of years after the fact. I've never met Steve or had any contact with him. Steve did all the first person shooter stuff. I
Mm.
did all the driving missions. So all of basically anytime you're in a vehicle or the mission was one of the related cinematics to it was me. And then
Yeah.
Ed did the PC version, which they didn't have. I've never played it, but as far as I understand, they don't have the driving missions on there. They had some other missions that they did instead, and that was Ed.
Mm. Yeah, I particularly liked there was this island mission, this driving mission,
Oh yeah.
sort of towards the end of the game, the console version. That was really it was fast gameplay, and you
Mhm.
had to be really careful. It was a tricky level, but I remember the music in that scene was particularly good,
Oh, thank
and
you.
I waited ages to get my hands on the soundtrack at some point, and I recently listened to it again and thought, oh, this is this great part. This must have been this jungle chase thing, and it brought back so many memories. So this is, of course, your music that did that,
Hmm.
and
Well, thank you.
which does the same, I think, like when we listen to the Barrys and the Arnolds, it brings back so many memories from times that we enjoyed the Bond films. And what feeling do you
Well,
have listening to your music again after many, many years? Do you think, oh yeah, that was my official Bond thing? Would you call yourself an official Bond composer?
well, I that's a pretty high honor. I don't know about that, but uh, it's really kind of fun to listen back to it now because it was 22 years ago now, right
Mm,
around now, this time of year that I got the gig, and
yeah.
it was a really exciting time, and so there's a lot of memories around it that are also tied up. I had just I just moved in with my wife after starting the game. There's a girlfriend at the time, and we were in a basement suite, so she was just being driven crazy by 6 months of listening to the Bond theme over and over and over again. But there's a lot of memories tied up with that, and I also like this was the biggest project by far that I'd ever worked on, and so
Mm,
I had to learn a bunch of new technology and just the scope of it was bigger than anything I'd ever done. So
mm,
it was just a really exciting time. So when I listened back to it, I just kind of been brought back to all of it. And then also like I think with most composers, well, I don't know about most, but let's say most. Um, I certainly do this when if I hear something back that I've done in the past. It takes a lot of work not just to focus on what I could do better.
mm,
So there is a bit of that. It's mostly happy memories, but I hear that it's like, well, yeah, that's because you didn't know what you were doing there, so that's why that sounds like that, or that's
mm,
why you orchestrated it that way because you're making it up. So there's some
yeah.
of that, and I also think that I've talked about try to redo a couple of those tunes now, just when I've got some time, just to, like let's see what I could do with 22 more years of practice and better technology and everything.
Mm. Yeah, I
Haven't done
imagine
it
a
yet,
lot of it
but
is comes down to tools you use, isn't it? I mean, can you take us through the
yeah.
workflow of how this music is actually put together?
Well, I think for the most part, with the levels they gave me cinematics when they had them, usually they were pretty blocky, like very rudimentary animated cinematics, and then I would I know I went into the office a number of times to check out what the level gameplay was like in progress. And there
Mm-hmm.
was a few times they would send it home with me on a VHS tape. That's how long ago it
Mm-hmm.
was. And so I had a sense of what the gameplay was. I knew roughly how long the pieces needed to be. I think they were all in the sort of maybe 3 minutes, 2 to 3 minute range, and it was all just looping audio. So there was nothing very interactive about the score at that time. And then you just start figuring it out. What when you're watching it, what sort of tempo works and what sort of well, instrumentation is pretty similar from cue to cue, I guess. Some had more guitar and more drums and bass and whatever, and some were more orchestral. But they, you just kind of start. You get your tempo that you feel like is going to work for it, and then you just start laying down. I don't know. A lot of times it would start with strings, and then you just brick by brick you build your Lego house that turns into the music.
Can I offer you a lift? Just a bit closer. Almost there, 007.
The stolen device is in that truck. If we hurry, we can still catch it. By the way, who are you?
The name's Bond. James Bond.
You said it, technology today, you could do a lot of different things. I mean, today with computer technology, you can basically have an orchestra in your office.
Yes.
I know my friend Yannick, who is a composer. You also know Yannick, and my viewers will as well, because he often appears in my features and does music for me. And from time to time, he says, "Oh, I can redo this track. I can do it better now. It will sound better now in 2024 than it did in 2016." But I always say, well, it's a product of its time, you know. And we did a film together, my documentary film, and I recut it for YouTube. It will premiere on the 15th of March. And he said, "Would you like new music for it?" And I said, no, because I liked the music in 2016 when it was a finished product. So as a product of its time, I wouldn't change anything. And I think from my personal view, I wouldn't change anything in the game soundtracks as well, because I like them as a product of their time. And I think the music holds up pretty well, especially also Everything or Nothing, which was just 2 years later.
Yeah.
But from the entire score, when you look at the score presentation, it's almost like for a Hollywood movie. It's a really great sounding soundtrack.
Well, Sean Callery did a fantastic job on that score. I just contributed a few little bits here and there to that. So that was almost all him. And he did a great job. He's quite the pro. So he knows what he's doing. And they had some live orchestra, I think, for parts of it. And
Yep. And did you have any sort of direction from the IP holders, let's say Eon Productions or Electronic Arts, that were dealing with the IP at the time for the games? Or did you completely come up with everything on your own, just gave it to them and they said, well, that's good, we're going to use that? Or did you have any sort of input, what they wanted, or things you could do or couldn't do?
From what I remember, they did give me some input initially, but I think the brief was really just do Bond music. And so at the time, that was right in the David Arnold heyday on the series, and that's what Bond music sounded like to me. It was that and the Barry scores and some of the others that the guys that came in for one movie or at that point. So I knew all the music really well, and was really just trying to do my best David Arnold score, really. And so there would have been feedback. I don't remember there being a lot of revisions, but I do remember spending a lot of time polishing and going back and probably doing some iterations of the cues.
How long did it take from start to finish, the entire score?
I think it was about 6 months, which when you look at how much music there actually is, I think there was probably about 25 minutes of music in the game or so from me. And 6 months to do 25 minutes of music seems like a crazy amount of time right now. Because I guess I've gotten onto the TV movie schedule where you're doing an hour in 2 weeks. And granted, I put a lot more detail or the orchestration was a lot more detailed than you get in a lot of TV work. But yeah, I think it was about 6 months.
Have you played the game with?
Oh yeah,
in the finished state.
Yeah,
how is that feeling when you play this? When I say this jungle level, which has this really great piece of music, how does it make you feel as a composer playing the actual game that you did the music for?
It's really fun. Like it feels really surreal when, like with Nightfire, I knew that I'd done the gun barrel, for example, and was tickled that I got to do that. And then when I got the game the day it came out, and came home and fired it up, and then you see it, and it's like, oh, this is, how cool is this? Like, it was really neat to be able to do. And then with Everything or Nothing, I had done, Sean was going to be doing the bulk of the game, and then I got sort of called at the last minute to do, because he was tied up, he was doing 24 at the time, and I got called to add a few missions that he wasn't able to do, or they had added a few missions. And so they brought me back to do those. And I had done the initial E3 presentation music and my gun barrel. I had done a new gun barrel for that. And then when I got home with with Everything or Nothing, when it came out and threw it in, I had no idea they were going to use my gun barrel for that, which was a delight. I was super excited about that, because it felt like I don't know, first points on the scoreboard or something like that. So it was really nice. And then it's also cool.
The first thing you see,
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got a 13-year-old son, and he's played a couple of the games I've worked on, and seeing him, from years ago, even sitting down to play a game and enjoying the game, but also hearing music that he knows as his dad is pretty cool.
I can imagine, yeah. And for me, always seeing the gun barrel and hearing the initial gun barrel music, that gets me into the game, that gets me hyped. I mean, you see the quality of the score that will be presented to you of that game. If the gun barrel's good, the rest must be good as well. And I always had that feeling. Yeah. Maybe I would take out GoldenEye, because again, a product of its time. Even the music for the N64 GoldenEye or The World Is Not Enough, I mean, they are iconic in their own right. But, well, if I compare it, I would rather much more listen to Nightfire or Everything or Nothing. Because, I mean, GoldenEye is all over the place with the music. And it's sort of...
it is a little bit, yeah.
Yeah. And it has not many dimensions to it. I think the later Bond scores for the games had much more dimension to them. And
I think the guys that were working on GoldenEye, on the game specifically, there was such enormous restrictions on what they could do, just with the technology they had at the time.
Absolutely.
The fact that they made a score that's still pretty cool is amazing. I've still got my N64, and about 6 months ago, I dusted it off and was like, okay, let's see what GoldenEye looks like in hindsight now. and
Yeah,
it's a little tough to look at on a giant TV when you're looking at that resolution. But
that's true.
instantly, you hear the load music from that, and it takes you back. I spent so many hours playing that game.
Absolutely, yeah. I bought an N64 just for that, and I had to buy the game in
Oh yeah, me too.
Austria because it was forbidden in Germany because there were
Really?
several pixels of blood. Yeah,
Oh,
that's why it was. Yeah, well, the 90s, they
yeah,
put
exactly.
everything on the index that was new and unusual, and I mean today there is still this discussion going on of a lot of shooting in games, and a lot of it a first person shooter. It corrupts our youth, things like that. It's in the newspaper every other week. It dies down again, but in the 90s it was the first shooter that started it all, and
Yeah, well,
then they
and
quickly shelved
at
it.
that point, right, and at that point too, really, it was a new technology, and there's no long-term studies of what it's actually doing behaviorally to people, and so I can understand why that would be a concern.
Yeah, I mean, I was young at the time when GoldenEye came out. I mean, I didn't go buy an AK-47 and started shooting people.
No.
It was weird how people arrive at these conclusions. But okay,
Yeah, well, and if I was going shopping, it definitely would have been for the proximity mines. Those are always my favorite.
yeah, absolutely, yeah, and quite effective.
Yeah.
So, you said in the beginning you also a big Bond fan. Do you have favorites,
Yeah.
favorite actors, favorite film, favorite score, of course?
Yeah, well, I do. I've seen the movies, dozens of times. Uh, I think that pretty much every actor has one great movie, at least.
Hmm.
I think
True.
that my favorite Connery from Russia with Love is that. There's a lot of '60s movies. Just it was a very different time, and uh, some things don't translate quite as well, and some of
Mm.
the pacing. It's just a different thing, but I think From Russia with Love really holds up.
Mm.
Uh,
Yeah.
On Her Majesty's Secret Service is one of my favorite of the whole series. Uh,
Mm.
I think it's a fantastic movie. For the Moor, I love, even though it's about as 1981 as you can get. I love For Your Eyes Only.
Me too.
There's something about the back to basics of the story. Uh,
Mm.
Basically, well, it's sort of an ongoing thing. Anytime that the series gets too ridiculous and then they do a reset movie where they bring it back to simpler times,
Hmm.
I generally really like the simpler ones.
Mm. Yeah.
Those tend to be really strong, I think. I liked Living Daylights quite a lot, Goldeneye, and it's pretty hard to top Casino Royale.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the best of the Craigs, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And we just
Yeah.
saw it. The Vancouver Symphony did. They showed the movie in January, playing the score live, and
Yeah.
so we took our son, and he'd never seen the movies. He knew of them, but had never seen any of them. And
Mm.
from there on, like we've watched. We haven't done No Time to Die yet with him, but we've seen all the other Craigs, and
Mm.
it's a solid movie. Like it's so good.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I agree. Casino Royale, I really loved because you don't feel the runtime of the film because so much is happening, so many layers the film has. I love David Arnold's score for that. I'm
Yes.
also a big David Arnold fan.
Oh, me too.
Although some people say wow, the world is not enough. At some points he went full electronic, threw in everything that he had, but I think it worked in a way. It was action driven, and I always wonder when other people compose, how much of their favorite composer is in their work. So would you say there is a lot of David Arnold that influenced your compositions for Nightfire?
Absolutely. Sometimes probably to a fault. Um, I, I just loved what he was doing with the scores. So uh, I tried to live in the same world as what the movies were doing musically,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
yeah, there's definitely a lot of his stuff. But then I also would pull in little semi-subtle nods, probably not actually all that subtle nods to some of the Barry
Mm.
stuff, and I did like a little semi-quote of "Live and Let Die" in one of the levels, and just like a hint of a melodic thing that
Mm.
from there.
Yeah. But I
And
think as a composer, you try to leave some kind of a mark, so like an Easter egg, almost,
yeah,
to find. I mean, now I feel compelled to listen to it again and find that "Live and Let Die" piece Easter egg, because
I can't remember the name of the
couldn't
level. It
remember.
was it's after the snowmobile level. It's where you're
Mm.
in the Aston Martin and you're coming down the mountain, and it's the through all the snow. It's in there.
Yeah. Okay. I have to check it. I guess I have to play it again. That's the thing.
Yeah.
I have to get my PlayStation out and play it again. I know
Mhm.
I still have it somewhere. What level was the most fun to do for you? Where would you say, oh, this was just great. I had so much fun with that.
The Paris car chase was pretty fun.
Hmm.
That was a lot of that came from my original demo. Um,
Yeah.
that one was good. The island, or not the island. Oh, actually, that was fun too. The the mountain level that I was talking about with the snow was a lot of fun.
Hmm.
The underwater sub
Hmm.
level
Yeah.
was probably the biggest I got to go orchestrally in there, and that was good times. Um, I
Hmm.
just each level had its own kind of character, and I got to have a lot of fun with all of it. Really, like I just was, smiling the entire time.
Looks like we're on foot from here.
Where exactly is here, James?
Not far from my rendezvous point.
You mentioned the Bond melody earlier, the Bond theme. Would you
Yes,
say you or you
yes.
underused the
No,
Bond
I
theme?
overused it. I totally
You
overused it.
overused it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it's tough not to because it's such a cool theme.
Yeah.
Like every time you play it, you feel like a badass. So there's
Yeah.
this
I can
this
imagine.
huge temptation. Like no matter what you're doing in the game, it's probably going to work if you use the Bond theme.
Yeah.
Uh, so I definitely overused it.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
But I mean, when you're
Uh,
given the chance to work with
yeah,
this material, why not? I mean, today, when you do it and you don't have an official license or you didn't ask for permission, it's very
yeah,
tricky. You can
yeah.
get into very troubled waters doing that. And I imagine being given the chance to say, oh, you can use the Bond theme anywhere you like, no problem. I would overuse it as well. Definitely.
Oh, yeah. Well, and
Absolutely.
if you look at Casino Royale, the score in that, the way he dealt with that, using it so sparingly and just hinting at it
Hmm.
until the very end. Like, I wish I'd
Yeah.
seen that movie before working, just because I think that knowing or having a better example that you can do a Bond score without driving that into the ground,
Mm.
it would have been beneficial.
Yeah. I mean, also Thomas Newman used it sparingly
Yeah.
in Skyfall. Um, not to everyone's taste, because they were longing for it. I mean, Quantum also didn't have a lot of Bond themes in there, but David Arnold, for example, I always found he has his own hooks and melodies that repeat themselves in the films, and they become their own theme. And I always like that when a composer does that. I really, really love that. Were you trying that too for Nightfire? Could you have had the opportunity to have your own sort of melody that repeats itself?
I think it probably would have been smarter if I had to be a little more cohesive thematically. I think if I were to do it now, I think I probably would try to do some more of that. Partly because then you're not having. It sounds like composer laziness, but it's meant more as a tool where if you're writing new themes for every moment of the movie, or if everything has to be fresh, you're burning a lot of energy when if you've got things you can refer back to or melodic elements you can quote, it ties things together really nicely, and it makes it feel like more of a cohesive unit. And but it gives you places to go like if you bring in a theme from one area and then using it in a different situation, you can use it as a leaping off point and then expand and take that thematic thing farther and develop it. And that can be a really effective thing, but it's also a good way to work creatively.
If they would approach you to do another Bond game, would you do it?
Oh yeah. I had so much fun with those, and I think that I've learned a lot about how I would approach things differently now, but I'd love to do more stuff in that world. I think that when I was talking about redoing some of those pieces, that was really as much of it as anything is just playing in that world. It's so much fun.
Yeah.
And actually, last week, I just David Arnold had sold off some signed score sheets from Casino Royale. From the City of Lovers queue from when they pull into Venice. And so I got one of them, and I spent a couple of days, a week or two ago, just recording it. Like, just, okay, here's the score, let's just mock it up. And it was so fun to just, like, it's very different than anything I did in the games, but just to play in that world was great. It was great.
And I would think your game score, did you write notes for it really, or was it mainly computer work? Did you really have a written score? It's all computer.
No, I'd done. I had handwritten a little bit, but it was because I was at my day job and I got some melodic ideas that I didn't want to forget. So that's the only thing that got written down.
Okay.
But everything was computer except for live guitars and I think some bass.
If somebody wanted to be a game composer now, today, would you say go for it? It's a good industry to work in. You can live a good life on being a game composer, or would you rather say you have to do something else on the side? You have to do films as well?
I'm not really qualified to, at this point, I don't think. It's been probably about maybe 10 years since I've done a game. And I know the industry has changed quite a bit. There's all sorts of shifts in the industry that I'm seeing with companies laying off massive amounts of their staff. And I think from that perspective, it's a tricky time. Excuse me. But I do know a number of game composers that are doing fantastic work and are making a living doing it. So I think it's certainly possible. And some of the game scores are fantastic. Like, there's always been fantastic game scores, but I just finished playing Spider-Man 2, and it's amazing. The music is beautiful. And The Last of Us. That series is fantastic music,
Yeah.
and you know, there's a ton of them that have really exceptional music. So I think there's still lots of value in getting into it from a creative standpoint. Uh, I hope that the industry levels out a little bit, that that there's some more stability for the people that are doing the work.
Yeah. And I mean, games have become so much bigger. I mean, the playtime of Nightfire, how long was it when you really, from start to finish, you can finish that in a day or two. But when you really have open world games, big open world games, where they have orchestral scores recorded, I popped just into my head, Metal Gear Solid Snake Eater. Do you know that one? Also has a few years on its back. But I loved that score. I don't know if it was Harry Gregson Williams. I don't remember because he did Metal Gear Solid 2.
He did 2, 3, and 4, from what I remember.
Yeah, then it was his music, yeah. And the theme song, Snake Eater, it was all of this 60s vibe. And then you were, of course, in Bond territory. I thought that this would have worked as a Bond theme. Snake Eater. Yeah. It was such a fantastic song and very difficult to do. I tried it myself and it is so difficult to sing. And always when things are difficult and only a few people can do it, then it's really good. Like GoldenEye, Tina Turner. I would never dare to try and match that and sing it. Never. Because I know I can't do it.
I don't know if that's a big karaoke song. I think that one's that's kind of a, let's just put that up on the shelf and leave it in its pristine form.
Yeah, there are some you just don't touch. You never do Tina Turner, except when it's like an up-tempo, like Nutbush City Limits or something like that. You never touch Celine Dion, because you just cannot. And Whitney Houston. These are practically songs that are impossible to do when they're not up-tempo, when they're slow, romantic, dramatic songs. No, forget it. Interestingly, it's relatively easy to do Skyfall and No Time to Die, because they are relatively simple.
Yep.
And
with No Time to Die, you can really pull it in and go quietly.
Yeah. But, I mean, nobody knew who Billie Eilish was when that was released. At least many of the Bond fans didn't. Well, I knew her, but only because I practically live on the internet. But when I sang that song, you can give it your own, how do I say that? Well, you can make your own thing out of it, and leave the music as it is. No tone change, nothing. I didn't need to do anything. And I didn't need to match her slow, quiet singing. I could really do my own full throttle thing, and it worked.
Yeah,
and it was great. And the Bond songs are usually quite difficult to tackle.
Yeah.
No.
Did you see? There was the concert last year, the 60 Years concert, and it was I think Royal Albert Hall, and they were going to be doing. Someone had shared the video from it of David Arnold singing "You Know My Name," and first of all, I had no idea he sang, but I was thinking about that song in particular and thinking, "Geez, who are they going to get to do that?" Like that's Chris Cornell's had a monstrous voice, just this huge.
Yes.
Like, who's the poor bastard that's going to try and pull that off? And David Arnold sounded great.
He does, yeah.
I was so surprised, and it was really cool.
Very difficult song. Not every man's voice can match Chris Cornell. I tried, and I will never do it again. Yeah. It's that is how to clear an auditorium in one easy step. Sing "You Know My Name" when you know you can't.
That's that feels like something from like Octopussy or something like that. The bomb's going to go off at the circus, and so Roger Morse steps up to the mic and starts singing "You Know My Name" to clear out the circus tent.
Absolutely, yeah. It would have worked.
Yeah, absolutely.
Find the final question is, of course, going towards the future. What are projects you're currently working on? Is there something we can look forward to? And I also heard you're going to be an NPC in a video game.
Yes, I am. That is something I wasn't expecting. But I'm pretty tickled by the whole notion of it. So that's coming up. Yannick has I don't know, graciously asked me to do that. So that's going to be. If you see someone walking around in a game that looks like a potato, then you'll know I'm making my mark.
Okay.
So. And musically, I'm doing a series of movies. They're the Aurora Tea Garden Mysteries, and I'd done the initial run of movies. I did 12 of them, and I've done. They're doing a second run with a younger character, and so I've done one of them so far, and I think there's more to come on those. But it's I do a lot of TV movie work these days, and that's been keeping me quite busy, and so it's mostly that sort of thing these days.
It's great. The game, of course, we were referring to is Dangerous Connections. It will be released sometime in the upcoming year or years. I don't know how we have to see. It's a Bond-styled game. It has nothing to do with Bond. It's a completely different agent, but it will have a story that looks incredibly good. I've seen some of the builds of the levels, and my dear friend Yannick Tenhausen is working on it day and night, practically. And I think we're both in the same game. I appear as well in the game, but I actually have a speaking part where I have to record lines. Oh God. And he always told me, let's record lines and I guide you through it. And I said, okay, let's do it. And we never got round to it, but I play some secret agent, a British spy or something. And then I have to sound really posh.
Well, there you go.
Jeff, thank you so much.
It's the role you were born to play.
Let's see. We will see, I guess. Jeff, thank you so much for talking to me tonight. I don't want to take up too much of your time. And maybe we meet again somewhere down the line. Speaking about Dangerous Connections, people watch this channel.
We'll meet in the game.
We meet in the game and outside of the game when we talk about the game once it's released. I'm pretty sure we will all get together and exchange opinions. And maybe I don't know. Has he asked you to do some music for it? I mean, I don't know.
No, I think he's doing a pretty good job on his own. So
you don't want to take that from him.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't need me coming and mucking things up. So. Yeah, I can't wait to see what he does with it.
But it would be great as an Easter egg. It would be, Yannick,
Sure.
It would be great as an Easter egg to have part of Jeff Tymoschuk's music in there. I'm just telling you as your friend.
I'll just throw in like a strummed guitar chord and he could just drop it somewhere in the background of one of his cues.
Good idea. Good idea. Yannick, when you're seeing this, I know you're looking forward to this interview. So Yannick, listen to us. We know what's best.
That's right.
Okay. Jeff, thank you so much. I hope you will have a great time in the future. Lots of projects to work on, and I will follow your progress, as will everybody else. And otherwise, everybody else, thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe and comment if you have any questions. I will be able to answer them. And if you have questions for Jeff, please write them in the comments, and I will forward them. And if there are questions we need answered, we do a second interview. As easy as that.
Sounds good.
Whenever you have the time. Jeff, thank you so much.
Thank you, Benjamin. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.